I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We are now turning back to the book of Acts. Paul is in Corinth. He's been here for about a year and a half. He even got arrested near the end of that period, although Gallio, the deputy or proconsul, refused to hear the case, and so he was released. While he is here in Corinth, he has written his epistles to the Thessalonians, back up into Thessalonica, where his mission into Greece kind of started. He first came to Philippi, and then to Thessalonica. And so that's where we're at. He's been in Greece now probably about 2 years, maybe up to 3 years, but the second missionary journey is probably lasting 3 or 4 years. That's what we've been reading. We pick it up now. We're going to read in Acts chapter 18. But our last reading, we read the first 17 verses, so we pick it up here in verse 18 and we read to the end. And again, there are no Joseph Smith translations in chapter 18. And Paul, after this, tarried there yet a good while, and then took his leave of the brethren, and sailed thence into Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila, having shorn his head in Cenchrea. For he had a vow, and he came to Ephesus, and left them there. But he himself entered into the synagogue, and reasoned with the Jews. When they desired him to tarry longer time with them, he consented not, but bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem. But I will return again unto you, if God will. And he sailed from Ephesus. And when he had landed at Caesarea, and gone up, and saluted the church, he went down to Antioch. And after he had spent some time there, he departed, and went over all the country of Galatia and Phrygia, in order, strengthening all the disciples. So after spending his year and a half in Corinth, he sails back to Syria, which is where Antioch is. And he stops off in Ephesus, where he reasons with the Jews a bit. And they ask him to stay because they're interested. They want to hear more. But he says he has to get to Jerusalem. He has to attend the feast in Jerusalem. And so he leaves and he goes. And there's a little confusion here. He goes, says, when he landed at Caesarea and gone up and saluted the church. So that means he went to Jerusalem. Caesarea is on the coast. He lands, he goes up to Jerusalem, salutes the church. In other words, he's going to kind of give another accounting. He's doing his mission report. And probably this is around Passover again. And he's reporting back. He's meeting with the brethren, with the apostles. And then from there he returns to Antioch, up north. And from Antioch he again travels throughout all Galatia, which is where his first missionary journey was. Doesn't give us any detail of how he was traveling, but he goes through that area, that is the Asia Minor area. Now, he does take with him originally Priscilla and Aquila. These were two Jewish converts from Rome who were kicked out by Claudius, and they joined him in Corinth. He takes them, and they go as far as Ephesus with him, but they stay in Ephesus. These are righteous, there's a man and his wife, Priscilla and Aquila. They are righteous men, they will stay in Ephesus to teach the Jews, to strengthen the church there, but Paul leaves. Now, verse 24. And a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the Scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man was instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in the Spirit, he spake and taught diligently the things of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John. And he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, whom when Aquila and Priscilla had heard, they took him unto them, and expounded unto him the way of God more perfectly. And when he was disposed to pass into Achaia, the brethren wrote, exhorting the disciples to receive him, who, when he was come, helped them much which had believed through grace. For he mightily convinced the Jews, and that publicly, shewing by the Scriptures that Jesus was Christ. We have this introduction of Apollos here. Apollos is from Alexandria, that's in Egypt. So he is from the Jewish community down in Egypt. And he comes up into Ephesus, and he is preaching Christ. He believes in Christ. But he doesn't, his knowledge is limited to the gospel that John taught, of John the Baptist. So he probably got converted by John, and then went down into Africa and was teaching what John had taught, but he never got the full gospel through the apostles. So he comes up and he's teaching the gospel of John. He's still teaching Christ, but he doesn't have the fullness of the gospel yet. But he's a powerful teacher. And so Priscilla and Aquila, they take him aside and say, hey, I know you're zealous for the work, but there's a few things you need to know, a few corrections that need to be made. And Apollos is very receptive to it. He learns, and then he goes out and he's publicly teaching. And he becomes one of the greater teachers. He's probably equal to Paul in his preaching. And then he goes to the saints in Achaia, which is another area in Greece. We're not exactly sure its exact location, but it's out in Greece. They send him out. They send him with letters of introduction to the saints out there. And so he comes out there, and he is now preaching, and he starts having great success at proving to the Jews that Jesus is the Christ. And so most of Acts is, the first 10 or 12 chapters or so is the story of the apostles. We get to chapter 12, and we move into the story of Paul and his missionary journeys. But we do have a few hints that there are others, Apollos being one of them, a great missionary. He's never, as far as at least not yet, a companion of Paul. But we are being shown how other missionaries are going out and preaching the word, and with great success. Barnabas went on his trip with John Mark. Paul is on his missionary journeys, and Apollos is there as well. Great men, all of them working to spread the gospel. I leave that here. We will pick this up again in chapter 19 of Acts before going to any more of the epistles. So I will see you there.